Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Dora. I'm the organizer of this group. If this is the first time you're joining me, I come on here live every Tuesday morning, and we do a mini training, a mini coaching call, or basically bringing you awareness to a topic, anything that has to do with stress, holistic health and well-being, personal and spiritual growth. So we do a different topic every week, and I'm always open to suggestion. If there's something that you want to learn more about, message me, let me know, and we'll have a little conversation about it. So, all right. I hope I am live. It looks like I am, but certain options aren't coming up, so I'm not seeing any comments or people. So hopefully that will come online soon. But today we are talking about trauma and how that affects us. And the reason why I wanted to bring this conversation to you guys is because I had been attending the Wisdom of Trauma Summit that was hosted by Dr. Gabor Mate. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate. He is a Canadian physician. He's retired now, but he's one of the leading experts in trauma. And so I wanted to talk about this because it is such an important topic, and a lot of us think of trauma as though it is something that is, an event that happened, a horrible event that happened to somebody. And most of us would maybe look at ourselves and go, well, I don't have trauma. I've never experienced these big, horrible events. And so, first of all, I wanted to talk about, these big, horrible events that happen to people, and we call them sort of the big T traumas. And then we have other traumas that we call them small T traumas. So let me explain what this is. So trauma is essentially anything that happens or an experience that you have that where your nervous system is not able to handle and process, right? So for each person, it's going to be different, right? So if you have a nervous system that is quite robust and quite adaptable, and you have a lot of room to take on stress because perhaps you're very well regulated, there's not a whole lot of stress in your life, you can take on, more stress than someone who has a very hypersensitive or hyperactive nervous system, where maybe something small might throw throw off their balance, if you like. So there's not that capacity to take on stress. And so a trauma is essentially where the level of stress or the intensity of stress exceeds what your nervous system is capable of handling in that moment. And so like I said, from person to person, it's not easy to say, oh, this event is traumatic or this thing is traumatic to someone without knowing what that person's life history is, what they're going through in the moment, and, many other variables that will determine the state of that person's nervous system at the time he or she encounters that event or that stressor. And so the small T traumas that we talk about are essentially these kind of small events that perhaps you don't think of them as traumatic because they may not be, this huge thing that happened in your life. But nonetheless, they cause a sort of negative effect on your nervous system, and that you're not able to process this, emotion or the small T trauma. You're not able to process it and let go of it, right? And so what happens then is that these small T traumas or these emotions are held in your body, and you may not even be conscious of what these things are, but your body remembers everything. And there's also trauma, and then there's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And they don't always, go hand in hand. I mean, many cases they do, but just because you experience trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get PTSD. PTSD is, like I said, when your body or when you are not able to process the trauma that you experienced in your body. And when you have PTSD, even though this event or whatever that happened in the past, your body still relates to that event from the past as though it's experiencing it in the present. And so even though you can think of, like, not logically, you can think, oh, that event happened. Why am I still feeling this way? Why do I still have these reactions or panic attacks or, you know, other symptoms that show up that you seemingly feel like you have no control over, right? And that causes anxiety as well, right? Not knowing when you're going to feel these big emotions which you have no control over. So healing takes place when we begin to move the emotions through their natural cycle and allow them to become integrated into the body and mind. And the way to do that is really through the trauma. So we can't go around it. We can't pretend it's not there. We can't try to forget about it, because we may try to do that cognitively. But our bodies remember, and it's going to react. It's going to give a reaction when the right triggers come along, and you're going to get triggered again, and these emotions are going to come through. So until we process these emotions that are held in the body, we can't think the problem away. It's not going to happen that way. And so in order for us to process these traumas or emotions that are being held in the body, we need to go there. We need to look at them and see what's there and what's needed to help move this process along and help these memories and feelings and emotions to get integrated into the body in the proper way, so that we can move forward. Now, for someone who experienced trauma and they have the capacity or the ability or perhaps the support for them to process that trauma properly, help that trauma move through, then that person will not get PTSD. So it's not, that's what I mean, that they don't always have to go together. So if you experience trauma and you're able to move through that trauma properly, resolve it, you don't have to experience PTSD. And then there's also another thing called post-traumatic growth, which people are finding out about now, is that not only can we heal from our trauma, we can actually grow from it. We can actually grow from our experiences and become even stronger and even more resilient than before. And this is not about, looking tough and putting on a facade to look as though you're not affected by it. But it's really about going through this process where we learn about ourselves. We're going inward. We're forming and building on self-trust, self-acceptance, self-compassion. All of these things will help decrease the suffering that we feel in our lives and gives us that capacity to sit with what's uncomfortable so that we can process and integrate them in the proper way. So you've heard me talk about, big T traumas, small T traumas. What are some examples, for instance? So I don't need to give you examples of big T traumas. We can imagine, right? Natural disasters, accidents, and things like that are big T traumas. Medical traumas can be big T traumas as well. But the small T traumas that we don't normally think of, that we're not aware of, and we might even think we're not traumatized, I'm here to tell you, after all that I've learned, is that, you know, I can say it with a quite a degree of confidence that every single one of us have experienced some sort of trauma in some way in our lives. And this is because from because trauma gets passed down from generation to generation. And this is a really big topic, and I know that we don't have a lot of time to go through everything that we could possibly go through about trauma. That's clear. So let me just highlight a few things, perhaps to bring some awareness to you. And if you wanted to learn more about it, definitely reach out to me. I'd be happy to give you more resources and information if you wanted to learn more. But okay, so the small T traumas could be things like not feeling seen or heard when you're growing up, not having your needs met. And so a lot of the small T traumas actually happen in our childhood when we don't really know what these emotions mean, and we're learning for the first time how to interact with the world. We're learning for the first time whether the world is a safe place for us or not, right? Because the relationship that we have with our parents, it's going to determine how safe we feel about being in this world, right? So when I say trauma gets passed down from generation to generation, one example would be, for instance, if your parents were stressed, or if your mother, your primary caretaker, was stressed, or she had her own, she will have her own traumas and burdens and stress that she's carrying. If she's not aware of the stress and trauma that she's carrying, she's going to unconsciously pass it on to her kids. And how many of us have, as parents, or even not as parents, I'm sure you would have experienced something in your life where perhaps you lashed out at somebody, or you reacted to something, and then you thought, later on, go, wow, why did I react that way? That was a little bit uncalled for, right? You might even feel like, oh, I should not, like, I feel bad, like that person didn't deserve that kind of reaction from me, right? And so that's what happens when we have things that are held in our bodies that we're not conscious of, and that when the triggers come, the best thing that we can do, or the only thing we know how to do, is to react, right? And so this comes with parenting as well. No matter how much you love your children, when you have unprocessed trauma that's held in the body, there will come, a time where there's a situation, a circumstance, or something that's going to trigger that emotion or that reaction from you, and that's going to be expressed, whether it's directly or indirectly. Your children are going to experience that kind of reaction, or that emotional charge or energy that's coming from you. And from that, the child will receive that energy, and they may not consciously be able to process what this means. They're not going to have the cognitive ability to know that, oh, mom is, angry, but she's not really angry with me. What she really is angry about is that, deep insecurity that she's feeling that's being brought up by this trigger. Like, they're not going to know, right? So they're going to take this energy on, and and if we are not teaching our kids how to move through these emotions, they're going to stay with the emotion is going to stay in the body, right? And so I'm sure we've all gone through that, something in our lives where the we receive messages from the world, whether it be from our parents, whether it be from someone close to our family. It doesn't always have to be the parents, but a lot of the times the parents will contribute some sort of trauma to their kids because the parents are the one that are the primary caretakers. That the parents are the ones where they bond and where the kids who the kids depend on and they form attachment to, right? And so when we have these experiences growing up and we are not taught how to process these emotions, that's going to shape the way we view the world. Whether what the input that we get either tells us that, oh, this is safe, I'm seen, I'm loved, right? It's safe to be myself, it's safe to explore, it's safe to play, all of these things. Versus maybe you may feel as though when you were younger that your needs were never met, that your opinions don't matter because maybe you're being told, whether it be by your parents, your siblings, or other people close to you, that you're wrong, like you don't know anything, or you should be quiet, you shouldn't make noise, you need to be quiet, or that they only give you affection under certain circumstances, right? So that it's conditional. That if you're, I don't know, like, oh, it's not okay to express anger, but if you're gonna sit nicely, look pretty, and be quiet, then I will reward you with whatever, maybe love, affection, material things. And so as a kid, we learn how to behave, and then that gets really ingrained into us, into our bodies. And so a lot of the our personality, you cannot, it's being argued that it's not actually who you are. Your personality is the sum of your experiences in the past, that you've learned to be a certain way because that was the way you've been taught, that was the way that you survived. In order to survive, you needed to behave this way, right? In order to receive love and affection, you need to behave this way. And so all of these things, these kind of behaviors that we naturally form, that become our characteristics, that become our personality, that becomes our automatic reactions when we become triggered by certain things, these are all amazing protective mechanisms or survival mechanisms for when we were children. Because as children, the dynamic you have with parents is really complicated, right? You are sort of powerless in a sense. You depend on your parents to give you shelter, to feed you, right? To give you love and affection, to connect with you. And so no matter how horrible the situation might feel at home, until a certain point, you're going to be dependent on your parents. So you need to continue to have that relationship with your parents. And so this is why even for kids who are, in the family with abusive parents, and you might think, how could they still, how can they live in that way? Well, it's a survival thing. They are dependent on the person. Unfortunately, that person abuses them. So it really does, shape the child's development growing up. And hence why a lot of people that grew up from abusive families actually go on to have abusive partners and so forth. So it's not as easy to say, wow, why would you do that? It doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't have to make sense, because all of the drive and our reactions and all of the impulses are coming from the body. It's not rational, right? And when we're not conscious of what we're doing, when we're not conscious about what we're holding on, then we really don't have control over how we are going to respond, and and we're going to feel as though we don't have control over a lot of things in our lives because we're dependent on our external environment. You know, we're nervous and on guard all the time, worried that someone will trigger another response from you. And we all know that we can't control our external environment. And so it is quite nerve wracking, you know, not knowing what's going to happen and how you're going to react, um, and whether you're going to cause more harm to yourself or the people around you when you do react. So it is very complicated, right? Now, here is not about blaming anyone. It's not blaming your parents or anything, or blaming yourself because you think you've passed traumas onto your kids. Because the truth is, as we stand right now, we're all traumatized. Our parents behaved the best that they knew how, given their traumas that they had experienced and whatever traumas that they had been passed on from their parents and their parents and their parents and so on and so on. And the problem with society for the, past decades, generations, is that we haven't learned how to connect with ourselves. In fact, we are moving further and further away from ourselves. We're getting more and more disconnected. The more intelligent, cognitively intelligent that we get, the more we separate our bodies from our minds. We haven't been told how to deal with our emotions, and we have these ideas as a society of what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. And one really interesting thing is that even though we experience trauma personally, we're living in a system that is actually maintaining a population of traumatized people. And from the summit that I was watching last week, which is so interesting, is that Dr. Gabor Mate was saying that some of the most powerful people in the world are the most traumatized people in the world. And so our system has been set up to either induce more trauma or to exacerbate or continue perpetuating the trauma that's there. So it's not helping us heal. It's keeping us traumatized. And so I mean, that's a whole other topic that we can that can go a whole other way. But one of the things that was really interesting that Gabor Mate said was that illness and disease is actually, so whether it's physical disease or mental disease, these diseases, they're actually normal responses to trauma. These are normal responses to a toxic environment. And so these illnesses or diseases may include things like addiction, mental illness, violence, other socially unacceptable behaviors which are classified as, not normal. All of these things, and even to physical disease and manifestation. What Gabor Mate argues is that these are manifestation of people in trauma. And what we're doing as a society is that instead of treating these individuals, we punish them more. We ignore them. We put them into jails. We, all of these things, we shun them, right? And all of these environments actually don't help traumatized people to get better. They actually further traumatize them. And in fact, I think she's a psychologist, Fritzi Horstman. She is the founder of something called the Compassion Prison Project. And she was saying that the prison is basically a trauma center. So everyone that that she talks to that are imprisoned are traumatized individuals, and that they had adverse childhood experiences when they were younger. All of them, or 98%, right? And then what we're doing in prisons is that instead of helping them heal, they're subjected to more trauma. And when they come out, they're marginalized and they continue to experience trauma. Now, understanding that 95% of the people in prison are going to be released someday back into society, would it make sense for us to take time to help them heal so that they can come back into society and be functional human beings that will benefit the whole community and can become integrated? And so that we can, so for one, we're not going to be like threatened with more people coming out with mental disorders and more violent than before, right? What if we can help to help them heal while they are in prison? So this not only benefits the individual, but society as a whole. So there's so much more to talk about, but there definitely the views need to change in our society in all levels if we were able to start healing as a community. That we need to look at informing the justice or the legal system, policing, education, especially teachers have no idea, or they're not trained or informed about trauma. And we talked about childhood as being the time where we kind of maybe experience more of the small T traumas without even realizing what they are. This doesn't just come from our parents, right? We go to, kids go to school every day. They spend hours at school with their teachers, with other peers, and if teachers aren't trained to look for or aren't aware that maybe they're even imposing trauma onto our children, right? So I think this is very important, right? The medical field, most doctors are not trained in trauma, right? So you go in with physical manifestation or mental illness or whatever it is. Most doctors see you for what, 6 to 10 minutes per session? The most they could do is to change your prescription. Like they don't know what's causing the symptom, not the root cause of the problem, right? So we're really just doing a band-aid approach here. Corporations, many in all areas could benefit from people understanding what trauma is about and how it actually can go so deep and forms the person that we are, forms the personality that we are. And then one other thing that I want to touch on before I finish, I know that we're getting close to 30 minutes. Another thing is, I just want to come back to the generational trauma, is that sometimes, so we have the generational trauma where, say, your parents pass their trauma onto you kind of directly. So you have that feeling of, oh, I feel unloved, or I don't feel being seen or heard, and that could be your small T trauma, right? But there are traumas that can be passed down hundreds of years ago and coming to you. There is a certain energetic charge that one carries in their bodies. And then you don't have to necessarily explain the story to the person, but you can sense by the way that they act, by the way that they behave, by the way that they hold themselves, around different groups of people and so forth. Kids are very sensitive to picking up these signals, right? And so, from the documentary from last week, The Wisdom of Trauma, one of the examples that was given was, say, the black community and slavery that happened, I don't know, 400 years ago or something. Well, they mentioned a number of years. And and so they were looking at the trauma that was felt by the generations where slavery was still happening, all the way to children in modern day, that they're carrying that trauma from way back, from their ancestors that were traumatized from slavery. And one kid explained, gave an example of his or her grandmother, saying that she's such an amazing soul, she's the one that people goes to for advice. But whenever she would go out in public, where there are sort of other people, sort of the white community that are around, then she would automatically make herself really small. She'll hunch, she'll look down, she won't make eye contact with anyone. And so that kind of energy, that's what she learned to do, right? Maybe it's through her experience, maybe her parents passed that on to her, but that's her experience, and she automatically reacts that way. And her grandchildren sees that from her, and they pick up that energy as well. They feel something, there's something there, like, oh, okay, we need to make ourselves small. And one of the dangers of trauma being taken out of context, especially, say, with slavery, is that, when you were, say, if you existed during the time of slavery and you have all of these emotional charges that are held in your body, at least you knew where that came from, right? So it was in context to how you're feeling, so you're able to make sense of it somewhat, right? But when this energy gets passed down to a generation where now there's no slavery, but they're still holding on to this energy from their ancestors. However, the context is not there anymore. So instead of understanding that, oh, I'm feeling like this because of, slavery or whatever, now you're just left with that energetic charge that you're holding on to, that you have no idea where it's coming from. And when that happens, and when we're not conscious about what's happening in our bodies, what's going to show up to that person is that, what is wrong with me? Something is wrong with me. And that's really, it's really scary for the person, And secondly, it actually going to drive them further down that road, as something is wrong with me, something I need to be ashamed of. And again, if no one's taught them how to process these emotions, they're going to hold on to them and hold on to them and more, right? So, I mean, there's so much to talk about, and we're just, scratching the surface here. I did 7 days with Gabor Mate and all his expert talks on various topics related to trauma, and that was collectively, it's just a conversation to bring more awareness. There's so much more to talk about. So, like I said, my intention is just to provoke your thoughts and hope that this will prompt you to do some further reflection and inquiry into yourself. Let me know if you resonate with this, whether this makes you feel uncomfortable, and if so, why? Why might this be? And see whether you can be with this discomfort, or if it's too much. There's no judgment. Just observe what's coming up and what is your kind of natural tendency or instinct. Like, is it to push away? How does it feel to be with? the discomfort. And there's so much valuable information that your body is trying to relay to you at every moment. And by learning to listen and to connect with our bodies, this is the very first step towards healing. So I'm going to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed this session, let me know what your biggest takeaway was. And if you want to know more, if you want to learn more, or if you want more support or on understanding and working through your traumas, do reach out. I'd be happy to hop on a call with you to see where you're at and how I could help. So unfortunately, I'm not seeing any comments come through. That function is just not happening on Facebook. So if you did have a question, I'm sorry I'm not seeing it right now, but I promise I will answer them when I hop off. But anyway, have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will see you back next Tuesday. And if you have any questions, any topics that you want to dive deeper into, let me know. We can definitely have a conversation about that. All right. That's it for me. Have a great one, everyone. Bye now.